You've probably experienced laying at your bed at 1 a.m., thinking about your work, not being able to fall asleep. And a lot of times you might resort to taking melatonin or other sleeping pills to go to bed because your brain is just ruminating with thoughts. Well, there are two main reasons behind this. Now, the reason number one is because your nervous system is on overdrive, survival mode all the time. The reason behind that is because when you are in a chronic go, go, go survival mode with a lot of fires happening in your business, you're just trying your best to push yourself to stay, driven and alert and energized and just do stuff all the time without really focusing on recovering or winding down properly, then that will actually result to you not being able to recover properly, not being able to turn your mind off, and not being able to actually enter deep sleep mode, which will result in you being stuck chronically in this fight or flight mode. That's the first reason, right? Where I'm not going to talk about the second reason yet, the second root cause of why you struggle to fall asleep, why your brain is ruminating with thoughts about work when you try to go to sleep. So, to expand a little bit on this, you see, our nervous system has two subcategories. The first is, or the autonomous nervous system, is the fight or flight part of the nervous system, which is the sympathetic nervous system. This is responsible for you being alert and driven and energized and focused and go, go, go mode. The chemicals associated with this is cortisol, dopamine, adrenaline. So this is something that you want to be. This is a state, a mental state that you want to be in when you are trying to be productive and when you're trying to sign a deal, when you're in sales calls, when you're on coaching calls, and so on and so forth. The other part of the nervous system, which is equally as important for your productivity, with that, by the way, not enough people talk about, or not enough entrepreneurs try to achieve that state, is the rest and digest state. That rest and digest is scientifically called the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is the mental state in which you are sitting down, chilling, not really thinking about anything that is stressful, and most important of all, enabling recovery mode. The chemicals associated with this is serotonin, oxytocin, and anything that is responsible for actually enabling you to calm down and get into sleep mode. Melatonin, the chemicals that are produced while you're sleeping, which is a lot of testosterone, a lot of growth hormone, which are actually responsible for your next day's performance. But unfortunately, we are just hardwired to think that we just need to work more. And as a result, one of the main things that get compromised in our attempt to be more productive and get more work done is our recovery. What we do after work. How do we actually approach sleep? Or any form of recovery for that matter. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And when you have your foot on the gas pedal all the time, then you're trying to go to bed at night, it's like a plane that tries to land, but instead of the landing being like a linear landing like normal, you're flying the plane and then you just stop work and try to go to bed. The landing is like this. If you don't prime your nervous system for recovery, then your sleep is going to suck. It's going to take you ages to fall asleep, and you're going to require other external things to try to fall asleep. And it never ends because you never actually take the time to decompress from work, to wind down properly, and to prime your nervous system to get into that recovery mode. So what you always do is you're just chasing your tail, doing one task after the other, trying to catch up on work, on the lost work that you probably could have done earlier, but because you're so stressed out and scattered and distracted, it's taking longer than it should have, and you're constantly trying to do the tasks that are overdue, and you're going to bed when you're exhausted, and even when you're going to bed exhausted, you're still laying down, and your brain is just racing with thoughts, okay? And that is a big problem, because the next day, you're still repeating the same pattern. And if you don't stop to actually start giving enough depth and enough gravity to your recovery, it will never stop. So how do you actually fix this? Before we dive into the second root cause of this, which is equally as important, how do you actually fix this problem? Well, number one, you have to set a hard cutoff from work. Ideally, 2 to 3 hours before bed. You might hear this number and you might be like, but what do I do? 2 to 3 hours before bed? Are you crazy? I'm going to lose 2 to 3 hours out of my work? Think of it like this. Let's imagine you have a slingshot. Okay, and that slingshot is like, you know what? You put a rock here, what David used to kill Goliath. Then it's like a sling. It's not exactly a slingshot, but it's like, think about it. Forget that analogy, okay? You have a sling. Your performance and your focus and your productivity is what happens after you let go of that sling. Now, if you're performing at a level which is like a 5 or 6 out of 10 on average, if 10 out of 10 is peak, absolute peak performance, and 1 out of 10 is peak procrastination and like tiredness and grogginess and brain fog, if you're at like a 5 or a 6, that means that you're kind of like pulling back the sling and you're letting go, but it's not as sharp, you know, it doesn't go as fast. This is your current situation, your current performance. You're going to start deducting about a couple hours of work from your nighttime so that you can actually prime your nervous system for recovery. And as a result, the sling will pull so much harder the next day, and your work is going to be so much more effective and productive, and you're going to be sharper. So on paper, you might be losing about a couple hours of work every night, but in work output, you're gaining 10 times more. So you're able to complete more work in less time, because when you're thinking, when you're actually behind the computer making decisions the next day, you're able to think objectively, and you're not just in this constant firefighting survival mode. So that's the first thing. Enable a hard cutoff before bed, ideally 2 to 3 hours before bed. In that time, you do something that is completely unrelated to business. Unrelated. No starting arguments, no looking at your P&L, not getting on sales calls, most definitely not getting on sales calls, and doing stuff that is going to actually calm you down. It could be watching a movie. It could be spending time with your partner. It could be spending time with your pets. It could be reading a fiction book. It could be even playing not a competitive kind of like Call of Duty game in your console, but it could be playing something that is relaxing you and just allows your brain to just decompress. This is going to allow you to switch off from the cortisol and adrenaline down to your serotonin and oxytocin and the chemicals that actually need to be produced and the mental state that you need to enable to start getting ready for deep sleep and recovery. Because again, if we're trying to land the plane, we want the plane landing to be linear and not like that. The other thing that you want to do is you want to optimize your light viewing. So essentially, in simple words, eliminate all bright lights, all overhead bright lights, because the overhead bright lights are going to signal to your brain that it's still daytime, and we should still keep producing cortisol and not melatonin. So instead of that, you can just use some Himalayan salt lamps or some, one of those Philips Hue lamps that you can actually plug. I have one of them right here, one of them right there. All of my lamps in the house are smart lamps that I can control from my phone with an app that I can make them red or yellow or orange or whatever color I want. It's good for content, but it's also good for sleep, because you can put a lamp somewhere that is below eye level and turn it into a dim firelight color, and that is going to signal to your brain to start producing melatonin and to start switching off and winding down. Now, let's say you do those two things. You do something that is unrelated to work, and you do something, and you do the light thing. Even if you get bored, even if you're like, okay, I just need to get back to work, you're not going to be able to get back to work because you're just going to start feeling tired, which is natural, by the way, to feel tired at that time of the day. So you're going to start noticing that if you do those behaviors about 2 to 3 hours before bed, it's going to be like, it's not going to make sense for you to spend more time behind the computer, because you're like, your brain is not in a stage where, it's not in a mental state where it makes sense for you to actually work, because your decisions are going to be sloppy, you're going to be slow and tired and not as productive. The other reason, now we move into the practices that pretty much are going to help you prime your nervous system for recovery mode. So what is the other kind of branch? What is the other root cause of you laying in your bed thinking about work when it's time to go to bed, when it's time to actually fall asleep? The other problem is called dopamine mismanagement. And what I mean by that is the fact that you're overstimulated for the majority of the day. You wake up, you check your phone, you check work, you check emails, you check your bank account. In the distance between waking up and going to work, you probably check your phone 100 times. That's an over-exaggeration, but you get the point. While you're working, let's say you tell yourself, I'll do some deep work. Let's say you want to write some SOPs, or let's say you want to work on that one important task you have been procrastinating on because it's deep work. You're going to open the task, you're going to try to lock in, and in the process of doing so, you will find yourself ending up on other unrelated things like Slack, WhatsApp, email, on social media, and it's actually a lot of content switching instead of focusing on that one thing with no distractions. And that is still being overstimulated. So from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed, you're actually training your brain to chase disrupted, random, short dopamine bursts instead of something that is actually long. It requires effort, and the reward comes afterward from hard work. And the reason that this is causing you to lay in your bed at night and have racing thoughts instead of being able to just shut your brain down and fall asleep is because you are never left alone with zero external input with your own thoughts. So every single part of the day, you're doing something. You are distracted, either listening to music, listening to podcasts, on a call, working on some tasks. While you're cooking, perhaps you're also stimulated. You're watching something. While you're doing chores, while you're preparing your bed, while you're doing this, while you're doing that, you have external stimulus. So the answer to this is reducing that external stimulus and allowing yourself to get bored, implementing bored blocks or deliberate boredom blocks in your day that is going to allow you to sit alone with your thoughts and allow ideas to come up. Just let your brain do its own thing. I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs that even when they go in the bathroom in the morning to perhaps do number 2, to do their business, they are on their phones. They're still distracted. And even doing that for like 20 minutes a day, you're going to notice how much more calm and how much more interesting the deep work becomes. But you just need to get bored. You need to implement those deliberate boredom blocks. For example, when you are in the gym, try to not listen to anything. Try to not have any external input. This is going to be extremely boring, trust me, and painful, but it's going to allow you to recalibrate your dopamine baseline so that when you go back to work, it's extremely more interesting to your brain. It's extremely more stimulating. Just sit down and focus on one thing without getting distracted for long periods of time. And more important than not, if the only part of the day that you are left alone with your thoughts is when you try to fall asleep, no wonder your brain is racing with thoughts. And this is where the dopamine mismanagement affects your ability to fall asleep and recover. And if you're not able to fall asleep and recover, you're going to actually fall into the first problem we found out, which is that your nervous system is in overdrive. You're not allowing it to recover properly. So the one feeds into the other in many ways, as you probably understand by now. But you fix the first, and then you fix the other, and then you're pretty much 90% of the way. into fixing your recovery. So by implementing the deliberate boredom blocks, you're going to allow yourself to be more creative, be more focused on your work for longer periods of time without getting distracted like a monkey would do. And then, of course, because you're deliberately spending time with your thoughts and not just doing it when it's time to go to bed, you're not like, it's not such a like an overwhelming thing for your brain to sit alone with its thoughts. Because when you're never used to sitting with no input, staring at a wall, or in the shower, or taking a long run or a long walk with no input, then it's going to be overwhelming when the first time you do that, and that's why you have racing thoughts. Imagine you're always stimulated. You see those kids nowadays that they're always on their phone. Like they're walking, they're on their phone. They're just, I see people in my gym for that matter, that they're doing their exercises, and they're like literally, like one person was on this ab machine, on the chair, like on the leg raises machine, and he had his phone in his hand scrolling while he's doing his exercise. So imagine how that would feel for that kind of person to go on a long run or a long walk with no headphones, no phone. He would literally panic. And this is what your brain does when you're not allowing it to let flow its thoughts naturally and get bored. So to prevent that from happening and to prevent your recovery from tanking as a result, you need to implement the deliberate boredom blocks. So this is how you fix the problem of lying awake on your bed at 1 a.m., trying to fall asleep, but your mind is racing with thoughts. And trust me, if you implement those things that I talked about in this video, you're going to significantly perform better the next day. You're going to be more creative. You're going to have better motivation and more drive, and you're going to make better decisions overall. Because not only dopamine is the chemical or the hormone that directly impacts your mood, your focus, your motivation, but also your sleep, which suffers from this as a byproduct, is one of the main things tied to how you perform mentally the next day. So try those two things. Let me know in the comments if you are currently dealing with the problem of, ruminating thoughts while you try to go to bed. And if you need help with structuring a protocol that is going to allow you to operate at your peak cognitive capacity every single day, then that's exactly what I'm doing here. I have helped over 300 entrepreneurs and executives maximize their mental and physical performance through science-backed, data-driven protocols. And pretty much this is something that could perhaps benefit you as well watching this video. If you're watching this video, that probably means that you're struggling with issues that I could help you solve so that you can unlock a competitive advantage. So to help you understand how I could help you do that, I have left a link in the description of this video where you can actually click and walk through the process that I've worked with hundreds of founders and executives to help them optimize all aspects of their recovery, dopamine management, productivity, diet, and training for maximum performance. So click that link, see how the process works, and if it's interesting, we can probably help apply it to yourself as well. I'll leave you to it, and I'll talk to you on the next video. Peace.